Oh, bless you. Thank you for joining to find out more. It's been so hard to get this into those short 90 seconds max reels. So it's nice to be able to sit with you and just share a little bit more of this crazy life. And I've only given like the first few teasers really, because I'm giving a bit of background to how I got to where I am now. But every part of it has been a lesson, so I want to share those lessons with you. So I hope you're enjoying the little reels, and here we are now to just go a little bit more and almost like just fill in the blanks. So yeah, my mum had moved to Spain when I was 11. People are like, how were you left alone? I've had these messages. So basically my mum moved to Spain when I was 11. She met the love of her life, and he was called Van der Velde, which is where my name comes from, as you know. So my name's Van der Velde. So yeah, they met in this beautiful, she went to work in this nursing home, and basically they fell madly in love over a period of 3 years. My dad wasn't very happy about this, but back in those days it was like men can do what they want and the women stayed at home. So she'd been loyal for like 17 years while he was up to all sorts. So actually, yeah, she went and had this love affair. They fell madly in love. And why I took his name, little did we know they'd only end up with like 10 years together. But why I took his name was, he left all of that. It was worth millions, that place. And you know what? He left it to his family and said, listen, you think she wants me for the money? Have all the money, because they were all fighting about the money. And there's a lesson in itself, isn't like, you know, attachment to money and greed. You know, it was very prevalent there. And he said, you know, this is a Dutch man. I'm not bothered about this. I've found true love. And little did he know at that point, he was 48 then, that he'd only have 10 years and he would die at 58. And they had the best 10 years. I was invited to go on that journey with them and move to Spain with them, but I didn't go. I was like, no, my dad was having a really hard time, so I'll stay with him. And that was the plan. But then my dad moved out, he met a girlfriend and he moved out. So that explains a little bit about how I was left in this house, kind of to my own devices. My mum didn't really know about it. She thought I was fine with my dad, but my dad had moved out. So this is where he'd pop back on a Sunday and I'd cook him his Sunday dinner, and that was all I saw of him. So yeah, just to fill in that little blank, because a couple of people have asked. And then I had this amazing life. You know, I felt freedom. I didn't feel abandoned. I felt like I had good friends around me. They could come to my house, have sleepovers. You know, it was a good time, and I was like completely independent. My parents didn't even know that I wasn't going to school and I had this job. So yeah, I had this job in this sweet shop. That was great. And then it moved on to the ice cream van, and I was like selling these ice creams, bombing around. Oh God, I learned to drive in an ice cream van. How crazy is that? But I guess that made me really good at adding up and maths, because you did it all on the hop. So that was good. I actually went back to school when I was 16. I rocked up on a moped. People hadn't seen me, obviously. I don't even know I was still registered. And I was like, come to do my exams. I borrowed my friend's books from another school, studied them for about 3 weeks and was like, I can do this. And I actually went in and passed some exams. Can you believe that? So yeah, that was an incredible journey. And then I got into it. It was a blooming great time, wasn't it? It was like the 90s. Oh, wow. So I was going partying, dancing, just having fun, earning good money on a weekend with the ice cream van, bombing around some nights doing the ice creams. It was great times. When I think back, wow. But I got to a point where I was about 19. I was like, right, I'm stopping all this, and I really could do with getting some therapy. Somewhere underlying, there must have been like I've been left, and you know, it does affect you. Surely it does. So I actually had 8 sessions with somebody, and he taught me about how to astral project actually. And these 8 sessions were amazing. I went and did this inner child healing and went back and gave myself all this love. And after these 8 sessions, I rocked out of there invincible, and I was like, I can create anything. And I did. And then forward rewind, I told you a little bit about the model agency. Well, I had a baby, didn't I? So I was with somebody, I was modelling. I did actually study nursery nursing. Didn't talk about that in the very short reels, but I studied nursery nursing for 2 years. So I was doing that, and I was working with quite a well-to-do family, and we would travel a lot, and I'd look after the kids. And then I started to do modelling. and I was going off to London. It was very high level catalogue stuff and all of that. But I didn't want always getting the best jobs, and I wanted the best jobs, which is one of the reasons why I was just like saying yes to this model agency, because I thought I'll give myself the best jobs. So I was dating this guy, and I'd gone on about a year dating, but it was very casual. I'd see him on a weekend, then I'd be away working in the week, so it suited me. I certainly didn't plan to get pregnant at 22. And there were some big decisions to be made around that, especially as like my career was taking off and I was modelling, and it wasn't a person that I wanted to spend my life with. I was really honest about that, and I wasn't ready for this child. But something said, listen, this isn't about being with him, this is about saying yes to whatever was going to unfold. So yeah, I had my beautiful son, and really it gave me this so much resilience, because it was me and him now. I'd cleared a lot of the past, I was ready, I felt invincible, I'd had this therapy, and I was like, yeah, I can do anything. The father still saw the child, and this particular day I'd left him with his grandparents on his father's side, and just got back to work 6 weeks after he was born, and it was just easing back in, so I did extra work. And out of all the 20 people that I could have sat next to in that room, I sat next to this woman, and she was like, I recognise your, in them days everything was on the phone obviously, so she was like, yeah, I recognise you, and I was recognise your voice. And it turned out I'd worked for a couple of years before that. And she said, I said, what are you doing here, doing like this extra work, apart from, in them days, like £100 a day or whatever was good money. Apart from that, she's like, yeah, well, I'm like 65 now, I'm looking to sell the agency. And without even a thought, I was like, I'll buy it. And I was like, walked out of there, went home to pick the baby up, back to the grandparents, and they said to me, hey, a shop's come empty. They had a row of shops. And I was like, really? I said, well, obviously, without saying anything bad, there'd been no contribution from the father's side or whatever, but I was fine with that, I was independent. But I did ask them, could I get a discount on the rent for it? And they said, yeah. So I was like, in the flow, I was like, this is meant to be. So I took over this shop, I moved the agency up, I got some help from the Princess Youth Business Trust and did it out beautifully. And then I was like, right, in a proper business now, because I had these 400 girls and they had to be working. There was some contracts came with it, what was it in them days? It was like cigarettes, Marlboro cigarettes they were giving out at races, and then we gave out the trophies at the horse racing. So there was already obviously a few contracts. But then I went to the biggest agency in the north, and actually a lady that I'd worked for there was the assistant for about 10 years. And I said, listen, if I double your wage, will you come and work with me? And she said, yeah. And I'm thinking, I don't know how I'm going to pay this double the wages, but we're just doing it. And she came over, and of course she brought a lot of other contracts with her. And we expanded quickly over a period of a few years. And I worked really hard. And then we get to the point where I had everything on my vision board. So I've now got this beautiful house that I'd done out like a palace. It was amazing inside. I had a brand new car, all the trappings that we think are important when we're in our early 20s. But there was one thing missing, and it was the love of my life. So I just focused on that part of my vision board. And on the vision board, I remember the words, of course, and it was, through the grace of nature, these things or something better now manifest for me. They come to me in easy and simple ways, and it is for the good of all concerned. And I would look at it every night and say, yes, I have it. Yes, I have it. Before I had it, by the way. Yes, I can have it. Yes, I can have it. And then this one thing that would always be like, mainly because I didn't have time, was this love of my life that was on there. And then there was a day where I'm like, I'm ready. Yes, I can have it. Yeah, and I think it was about 2 weeks later, bless him, that he knocked on the wrong door, Stephen. And there he stood, this beautiful powerlifting champion of Scotland. And he's like, oh, and I'm like, oh, you're looking for? And he's like, looking for a family member down the road. And I'm like, well, come in. And he ended up coming in. We had a cup of tea, and it was just this really nice energy of just chatting. Turned out we'd gone to the same junior school together, and he was just back in Harrogate for a very short time. Well, so we thought. And that night I was going out to watch my brother, who sings and plays in a band. So he said, well, I'll come with you. So it's gone from like this 6 o'clock, I was rushing to kind of get out and go see my brother, to like, well, I'll come with you. So he comes out with me, and we had a few drinks and we had a dance, and it was a great night. And then off he went. At 11 o'clock he went. I was with the rest of my friends. And a couple of days later, he knocked on the door, and apparently at 12 at night, I was still out. He'd been knocking on my door to come back and said, I can't stop thinking about you. And pretty much that was that part of the journey. 2 weeks into this relationship, he's pretty much moved in and he's not going anywhere else at this point. He starts to tell me about this Viagra. And this Viagra's come out, and he got some, and he's like, let's try it. And we tried it. And then he said, right, we're going up to this festival, which was Edinburgh Festival. And he said, I'll write a prescription and we'll get some. So he writes this prescription. I go in the chemist to get this Viagra. Just thinking, well, he's a doctor, what's wrong with this? Not really thinking about it. Until this policewoman simultaneously walked in as I'm going out. And I was like, wow. Jumped in the car, he runs away, like puts his foot down and zooms off, and I'm like, what's happening? Why have the police turned up? At this point I'm thinking, are you even a doctor here? And he explains to me, look, it was an old prescription pad from where I used to live. I said, well, we've got to go into the police station and explain this because they'll be looking for me. So we turn around and we head back to the police station. So imagine this is like 5, 6 o'clock, rush hour traffic, Knaresborough Road, and the police swoop in on us. These vans, a big deal, you know, like 4 cars. I get dragged out of the car, it's me. And he's like, no, I'm the doctor, I've written the prescription. Anyway, long story short, we're held in the cells for 8 hours. But we had this duty solicitor go in between both of us. And the duty solicitor is like, look, this is a front page story. You've got this mad Harold Shipman at the time who was murdering his patients, this doctor. You've got Viagra and you've got a model agent. They said it's going to be front page news. So me being me, having a model and promotions agency, came out after this 8 hours and said, we've got to sell the story before it gets told another way, that it was an experiment, that you've been careful, that we were trying to work out, did it work for women? Long story short is it hit their papers big time. We're watching the news at 10 that night, and I'll never forget this. I've got to tell you this, but basically I've had all my makeup done by, obviously I've got makeup artists, and in those days all the newspapers were black and white. So these black and white newspapers, so I've gone big green eyeshadow, big red lips, you know, and this is what the makeup artist has said, let's really make it stand out. And this is how long ago it was. They've got the pictures and said, we're sending this down line, at which point I'm like, how do they do that? This is how long ago it was. So they did, they sent it down line and they came back and they went, it's going front page. All I remember thinking was, oh my God, I've got these green eyeshadow and these big red lips. I was mortified, and sure enough, that was what was on the news at 10. The next day we opened the curtains and there was all the paparazzi, and we became in demand on Channel 4 this, BBC Radio that, all of everything. Everyone wanted a piece of this story. So yeah, we milked it. Next minute, Pfizer have got in touch and said, listen, we want you to sell this for us. So that's how they dropped that off at the house. And I think that's about the summary of the little reels that I've been doing all week. So thanks for tuning in. Of course, the lessons are, you know, what I've learned since is, yeah, you know, I travelled off multidimensionally. I became a healer at that time as well. We touched on it briefly. I'll come more to that later. But all these parts of our life, including the resilience that I had to have as a kid, including like manifesting and materializing like the love of my life, all of these things all played a massive part, because even though Viagra, I then wanted to learn how people could have these multiple orgasms and everything naturally. And that took me down the road of learning all of the energy work that I started to do with Tantra and all of that. Of course, then I studied psychology, and that was a deep dive. Steve couldn't really work anymore in the UK, so we moved to Spain and opened doctors' clinics there. after that whole Viagra story. What an incredible journey. And that's where I started to study how we could really get these incredible results without the Viagra. And more importantly, how much of the erogenous zone is actually in the mind. And yeah, that led on to the next 10 years of my life, where I was studying all these healing modalities, and as well as psychology, and as well as the NLP, and became a trainer in all these different techniques that I do now, which has evolved and adapted into not only business but also coaching the CEOs that I do. But I'll tell you more about that journey, because of course, you know, that isn't the end of it all. And you know, how I got on TV is the next part of what I'm going to share with you. How sadly he died, but how I was blessed to be able to bring up these two kids to be the dynamite humans they are today. And we'll slowly come into the lessons and the learnings. But what I'll say to finish this one is, wherever you are on the journey, everything is linked to a bigger picture, and it'll all make sense one day. So I look forward to seeing you for the next episode.